I come to the Shadow Minister, Dr. Kieran.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to colleagues on all sides for their contributions today, and I welcome the Minister to his post.
Fire, welcome back to the House of Commons. And brace yourself, because this debate is nothing short of explosive. Today, MPs are clashing over a justice bill that critics claim could let rapists and paedophiles out of prison earlier. Yes, you heard that right. On one side, the opposition is sounding the alarm about the dangers of permanent sentencing changes. On the other, government ministers are pushing back, pointing fingers at Labour's own record. The stakes? Victims' rights, public safety, and the credibility of Parliament itself. Let's dive in.
His first time at the dispatch box today, is that correct? And as I've spoken about before, wanting to see more consistent delivery of justice for victims of serious crime was one of the primary reasons I sought election to this place. And it's true to say that I don't think in my lifetime there's ever been a government for which I could say there has been a universal delivery of this. For decades, across parties, I think far too often our justice system has fallen short. I'm sure many members of all parties can relate to hearing about some of the most horrific crimes taking place and being appalled at the sentences given. That isn't new. But the question we have to ask ourselves today is, are we making that worse or better? Will more victims get what we would consider justice, or as a result of this bill, or will less? Since Labour came to power, we have quite rightly been holding them to account over measures they've already taken to let people out of prison earlier, and members on both sides will be familiar with the debate we've had around pressure on prison places and where responsibility for that lies and what could be done about it. We've had consistent debate about that. Members opposite point to our prison building record. I point out to members opposite that the pressure on the prison system they left under the last Labour government was worse, and that there are other options on foreign nationals and the remand population. And a lot of heat is generated, there isn't much more to it. They point out that they've had to take emergency steps, and it's true, the measures they've taken have not been permanent changes to our sentencing framework. But I say to members opposite that today is something very, very different. What this bill is doing is very, very different. And as demonstrated by the member for Morecambe and Lonsdale and others, I'm not sure that members opposite have fully recognised what the government is asking them to support today. There are measures to be welcomed in this bill. The new restriction zones, the measures to better track domestic abuse cases that I know the spokesperson of the Liberal Democrats has supported. And there are a number of other reasons why I don't support this bill. We've heard from members raise criticisms, including the Shadow Justice Secretary, on short sentences, on community sentences, on parole board reform, on probation, on the Sentencing Council. But I can honestly say I'm not surprised that members opposite don't agree with those particular criticisms. But I don't believe members opposite can sincerely think what I'm about to talk about next is something that they would knowingly want to support. Members supporting this bill will be putting their name to a bill that will forever change our sentencing laws to let rapists and paedophiles out of prison earlier. The member for Doncaster Central talked about legacy. I can't honestly believe that members opposite want to support a bill that will allow rapists to get out of prison earlier, and that will allow paedophiles to get out of prison earlier. This is not political posturing or hyperbole or scaremongering, as the member for Cannock Chase described it. This is not an unfair or interpretation or misrepresentation of the bill before the House today. Rapists and paedophiles, those are the people members will be voting to let out of prison early if they support this bill this evening. Is that really what members on the benches opposite came to this place to do? I will.
I do thank the Shadow Minister for giving way, and he is reading out a series of crimes which are reprehensible. I don't think anyone in this House would want to see individuals who commit such a crime have anything but the book thrown at them. But in the spirit of the tone...
Collision, and there it is. The political bombshell of the day. The opposition doesn't just disagree with this bill. They're accusing MPs of knowingly voting to let dangerous offenders out sooner. That's one of the sharpest charges we've heard in the Commons this session. But here's the kicker. The government fires back with statistics on Labour's dismal record on rape convictions. This is the heart of parliamentary theatre. Outrage clashing with counter-outrage. But what do you think? Is this genuine concern for victims, or political point scoring in the middle of a prison crisis?
Which he's read that list out. the 2.6% rate for charge for people that were arrested for rape that his government oversaw. Do you have anything he wants to say to the House about that particular damning figure? Because there are people today who haven't even been let out of prison early because they never got there in the first place. What does he say to that?
I thank the member for his question, and he will have noted that I said at the outset of my remarks that I've never been entirely in support of all the policies of government of either party when it comes to these issues, and he's every right to make those criticisms. But I say to him, those criticisms don't make any change to the vote he's being asked to make tonight. They don't make any change to the policy he will be putting his name to and supporting. There is no excuse for the things that he will be changing on a permanent basis, not on a temporary basis to deal with a short-term prison crisis, on a permanent basis. And I don't really think that that's what any of their constituents want. These are profound and permanent changes to our sentencing laws, and changes, I would argue, are the exact opposite of what the vast majority of victims, their families and the public want to see. And they will sit on the record of those members and this government until the next election. They will need to justify themselves to their voters. That is what Labour members are supporting in this bill tonight, and I really don't believe the majority of members opposite really, deep down, want to do that. It will be a great compliment to party managers if after this reality has now been spelled out to them, members opposite to decide to support this bill anyway. I know if they spoke to their constituents like I speak to mine and asked them about child abusers and rapists, they will tell them they are already concerned about the limited time they spend in prison undermining justice. So many times we've heard from members in this House about the horror of rape and other sexual offences. We've heard about the victims of grooming gangs. We've heard about the horror of all kinds of sexual abuse. Not once do I recall a campaign or a concern raised by members that the answer to this is to make offenders like that spend less time in prison. I accept that there is a different debate to be had with different cohorts of offenders and different offences. There is always a tension between prison time as a punishment and helping rehabilitate offenders. And as others have raised, and I've agreed, I don't think the bill strikes the right balance in that area, but I respect those members opposite and indeed members of the public who would draw the line in a different place to me for certain types of offences and offenders. But we're not talking about the drug addict stealing to fund their habit, or the young man from a broken home who spent their childhood in care who vandalises the local playground. The member for the Forest of Dean, the member for Peterborough, the member for Bury North, very many of them coherently and sensibly raise the debates we might have about how long those...
So, where does this leave us? On one hand, the opposition paints this bill as a catastrophic betrayal of victims, one that permanently rewrites sentencing law in favor of offenders. On the other hand, the government insists Labour can't escape its own failures on justice delivery. The result? A fiery Commons showdown that exposes deep divisions not just on policy, but on principle. If you found this debate as explosive as we did, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping UK political breakdowns. Bell.
Those individuals spend in prison and how we rehabilitate them. But we are not talking about these sorts of people. Let me also clear up any confusion there might be about the circumstances under which these violent and sexual offenders will be released early. Members innocently may have been led to believe that prisons will have to jump over considerable hurdles to secure these early releases. In fact, the former Justice Secretary told us they would need to earn their release. The reality of these proposals in the bill make it clear what a complete sham that suggestion was. Actually, they will actively need to break prison rules to run the risk of losing early release. That isn't earning anything. That is doing what the majority of the public do every day, day in, day out, without any reward, just behaving yourself, not breaking the rules. But apparently, if a rapist or a child abuser does it, Labour thinks that should entitle them to walk away from the proper punishment they've been given for their crimes. In fact, despite what they told the press in an attempt to manage the news of this terrible set of policies, we were given the impression that the large discounts of sometimes many years off prison time could be quickly reversed for bad behaviour, that this was a radical departure. Whilst the amount of time they're choosing to let people out certainly is radical, the mechanism to keep people in is nothing of the sort. We see in the detail of this bill they will simply make use of the existing prison punishment legislation. I wonder if Labour members opposite know the average number of days in prison that is typically added by the prison punishment regime. For the latest data I could find, the average number of additional days given to a prisoner who breaks the rules is 16. 16 days. when sentences for rapists and child abusers are going to be discounted by many months and years, they run the risk of having a handful of days added back for breaking prison rules. Shameful. And it isn't just these offences, as I've mentioned. The member for West Bromwich talked about the case of a 15-year sentence and how those victims would feel for the person concerned not getting a lifelong driving ban. Well, how are they going to feel when they're told instead of serving 15 years in prison, that person spends 5 years in prison? The current parlous state of this government is a blessing for Labour MPs tonight. There are very many other issues receiving media coverage. The political survival of the Prime Minister himself is in question. So they may get away with voting this through unnoticed this evening. But this is just the first stage. I know the timetable for this bill is as short as the government could make it. Just a day of committee of the whole House, which also means that very many victims groups won't get to come before the House and voice their objections, and then one day for report and third reading. So they clearly hope this bill also goes through its future stages unnoticed by their constituents, that they won't know that Labour MPs want to let rapists and paedophiles out of prison earlier. That is the reality of this bill, that you are voting through to let rapists and paedophiles out of prison earlier. That is the reality, and the chuntering from members opposite describing it as shameful. What's shameful is that you're preparing to vote for that policy this evening. Shame on all of them. I know the Leader of the Opposition, the Shadow Justice Secretary and I will do our utmost to hold them to account for this grave, grave injustice to victims and their families. We'll do our best to make sure their constituents do know and do hold them to account and do understand the choice they make in the end. And I honestly don't believe, despite the chuntering, that is a choice that many of them want to make if they've listened clearly to the position that I've set out. I don't think it's a choice that any of them came here to make. We've seen Labour backbenchers exercise their power over the welfare bill, and they can do that again, if not tonight, in future stages, because we will seek to amend this bill. Members opposite can support us in that.
We have to stop, Dr. Kieran-Mullen.
Members opposite should do their job as advocates for women and girls. Members opposite should do their job as advocates for all victims of crime and vote against these horrendous proposals this evening.
Hear, hear.